When I met today's guest in 2015, I already knew we had something special in common. We'd both taken the massive and very scary leap of leaving our loving, cozy, comfortable homes at a pretty young age. Myself to go from the UK to the US, and Erika to make her first career move away from her native Canada. Determined to grow as a person and as a creative, Erika Khanna moved to San Francisco after graduating from Concordia University. Next, after she'd visited the UK on vacation, it was London that was calling her, and this was followed by a move north. It was during this move north that I met Erika when I was on a visit home and she was working with my dad at a creative agency in Manchester, and we've been following her journey ever since. After reaching a bit of a crossroads and trying to decide what to do next, Erika's journey has now taken her back to her hometown in Montreal, where she's turned her love of yoga into a full-on life commitment. It's quite a story, and we're really happy she's agreed to share it with us here on One of the Eight.
Yoga is something that has meant a lot to me in my life, and that's helped me through a lot of different challenges. And it was a really important thing for me to be able to pursue more as I started working more and felt a lot of different types of stress, where I felt like I was at a crossroad in so many different times of my life, and every single time I felt that feeling of not knowing where to go next or what to pursue next. Yoga has really helped me bring me back to myself and feel aligned and feel that sense of, you know, I'm going to face a challenge, but I'm going to be okay.
I'm Jake Worley, and this is One of the Eight, bringing you the real-life stories of real-world people, the things they have achieved and the things that have inspired them. So, I mean, how's your weekend going? Are you all good?
Yeah.
You all ready to go?
My weekend's just been a lot of running around. Like, I had to get CPR certified for yoga, so yesterday I spent 6 hours in a room with a bunch of, you know, those like CPR dolls trying to learn how to give people like mouth to mouth, which was an interesting experience.
Oh, wow. Lucky you.
Yeah, it was one of those things where you could, like, you already know all the basics of it, and then once you're in a room doing it, you're like, why on earth is this taking so long? But yeah.
Hopefully your yoga teaching never puts anyone in the position where you need to do that.
No, exactly. It's just like one of those nice to haves, you know. So
to give you a little bit of a context, Erika used to work with my dad at an advertising agency in Manchester, but you're actually originally from Montreal, Canada, right?
Yeah, I am. So I'm actually born and raised in Montreal. I grew up here. I went to school here, and I started my career in Montreal as well, at first in advertising and then also in film. It's been an interesting journey being in Montreal because I feel like I've seen the way that the city has transformed in so many different ways over the last 30 years. And it's been an interesting ride, especially from the point of view of how Montreal has grown into being such an interesting community for people within the creative industry, whether that's in film or advertising, graphic design, or also from a technology perspective. So Montreal's actually become one of the biggest hubs for artificial intelligence over the last couple of years. And so it's really been interesting to see its evolution and to have had the perspective of living in a couple of other cities and a couple of other countries, seeing how, you know, Montreal kind of compares and contrasts to that. So yeah.
It's quite... I mean, I was lucky enough to live in the US for 5 years myself, and I think it's quite scary, isn't it, when 5 years can seem like a long time, but it's actually not. And you look at kind of what happens in the place that you're from in the time that you leave, just in such a kind of short space of time. So much changes really quickly.
Absolutely. I mean, I graduated from Concordia University in Montreal, and started working in advertising sort of right after. And I was really eager to get started. And I remember feeling like I was almost like a lion at the gate, like just ready to kind of break free from school. And then once I did, it was a really interesting experience. And I was working with really big brands. And I remember feeling like I wanted to explore other parts of the world. And it led me to move to San Francisco. And I experienced exactly what you're saying, which was, I mean, I was only gone or living in San Francisco, I should say, for 6 months. But because of the time of my life that I moved and the amount of time that I was gone for, it felt a lot longer than that. And there was so much that had happened in such a short span that your perspective shifts so much more. And you start to see the place that you called home in such a different way. And in some cases, it's really exciting. And in other cases, it can be a little bit daunting.
Yeah, I mean, you see things, even basic things such as shops that you used to know that are no longer there, or friends that you have that have moved away, and it's quite, it's just quite shocking, isn't it? Really, because you kind of, you're so focused on, and getting used to the new culture that you moved to, that you almost don't see what happens underneath your feet with the place that you're from.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember moving back from San Francisco, and in 6 months' time, the area that I was living in had been completely gentrified. And I was like, this is so weird, because there's shops in places where there used to be just an abandoned building. There's like a new restaurant that everybody's talking about that I have never gone to. And that's something that I normally, keep tabs on quite a bit. So it was really interesting to all of a sudden feel like a stranger in a city that I feel the most at home in.
What spurred your move to the UK?
So I had been wanting to move to England for a really long time. When I was in high school, I used to think about moving to the UK like almost daily. I had gone to a trip to London with school when I was in my last year of high school. And I was just so fascinated by the pace of London at the time. And I was also just fascinated by the way that I just felt so familiar with the city before. Like, I had never gone there before. And I knew my way around the tube quite easily, to the point where my teachers would let me and my best friend just run around, because we were responsible enough and we kind of had a grip on the city in a way that not a lot of other people did who we were on the trip with. So it really took me by surprise at how at ease I was. I mean, I came back to Montreal after that trip, and I was thinking about it for a long time. And of course, when you're a teenager, it's like you have this feeling of like wanting to break free from whatever's holding you back just constantly. And so for me, it was just like this idea in my head that I always knew I wanted to pursue, but I never actually knew how. And then it started to become that any job that I took after having graduated university was always because there was like a branch of the office that was based out of the UK somewhere. And as that started to develop more, I was like, it got to a point where I was like, it's either now or never. I was there for about 3 days, and I just felt like there was so much buzz in the air. Like, the air just felt busy and exciting. And I felt like there wasn't really anything in Montreal keeping me here at the time. I still felt like there were aspects of my life that I hadn't explored yet. And there were things about myself that I hadn't discovered yet. So it was a short sort of decision that had been sort of in the background, been taking shape for a really long period of time. And I'm really glad that I did it, because it taught me so much about myself that I know I would have never learned had I stayed home.
So even though you had kind of clearly a path and a desire to go there, were you nervous when the day came? I know, did it all become a bit real, or was it, this is what I've always wanted to do, I've got no nerves about any of this?
It was definitely a big pack of nerves. I mean, I'm really, really lucky that I have very supportive parents, and I have a very supportive network of people in my life. So I knew that if I left and anything happened, I could come home. Like, I knew that I had that support, which really, really reinforced this, like, the feeling of like, yes, I can do it, overpowering the nervousness. So it was kind of like both of those things that I was feeling at the same time on the day that I was moving. But there was definitely an element, like, once you're on the plane and you know you're heading somewhere, and you know you're only going to be home like for Christmas and maybe one or two other occasions, it's like it all gets a little bit tingly, you know?
The plane wheels hit the landing pad and you're like, oh no.
Yeah, exactly.
I always remember when I moved to the US for university, I'll never forget standing in the airport. My parents went to get a coffee and I was stood looking out of the window at the plane that we were about to get on.
Mm-hmm.
And you have that kind of, that split second moment where you think, what am I doing?
Oh yeah, 100%.
Let's just get in the car and go home. One kind of key thing that people always have to look at when they're moving to another country is language. And so I think obviously moving from Canada to the UK, language is not an issue. I think if I'm right in saying you're actually quite well equipped language-wise, do you speak 3 different languages?
I do. So, I mean, I speak English, I speak French, I speak a little bit, actually, I speak a little bit of Spanish. I can speak very poor Italian and very poor Dutch. So I think cumulatively
Wow.
you can say 3 languages, but 2 really well, and then 3 not super well, but enough to get by, to ask for a coffee or find out how to get a glass of water and things like that.
Okay, so give me a little challenge for you. Give me in French, I am one of the 8 and this is my story.
Je fais partie d'un de les 8 et voici mon histoire.
Wow, impressive. In England, it's a bit of a sore spot for me that I don't think the education system does enough to kind of make students aware of how valuable it is and how important it is to speak more than one language. I mean, when I moved to university, I was always going to a tournament or in a classroom with people from literally every corner of the world. And they were all speaking English in the van or on the phone, speaking their native language to their parents. And I felt kind of, obviously, I was given every opportunity education-wise, but I don't think we're made aware enough just how valuable for you to go to any part of the world and easily get by, just how important that is.
Absolutely. I think a big part of growing up in Montreal, given its French influence, is actually being part of a very big melting pot of a lot of different people from a lot of different places. And I mean, the ability to speak French for me in Montreal is, I would say, probably paramount to me being able to do anything from working to getting an apartment to figuring out how to do almost anything that is part of your day-to-day.
So as someone who's lived and worked in other countries, speaks multiple languages, you're clearly not someone that, shies away from a challenge. And I get not too long ago, you actually got, and I think a congratulations is in order here, your first yoga instructor certification.
Yes, I did. Thank you. So I did a 9-month yoga residency, which started last March and it ended this past December. And it was an amazing experience. I mean, yoga is something that has meant a lot to me in my life and that's helped me through a lot of different challenges. And I was never someone that considered myself like a dancer or anything of the sort by any means. In fact, I have always been like slightly made fun of by my family and friends at how terrible I am at dancing. But yoga is something that allows me to move in a way that feels really free and doesn't really have a specific way of, you have to move your body in this specific way in order to be like a yogi, for example. And so
Right.
it was a really important thing for me to be able to pursue more as I started working more and felt a lot of different types of stress where I felt like I was at a crossroad in so many different times of my life. And every single time I felt that feeling of not knowing where to go next or what to pursue next. Yoga has really helped me bring me back to myself and feel aligned and feel that sense of, I'm going to face a challenge, but I'm going to be okay.
So there are multiple types of yoga, aren't there? What are you actually certified in and what are the differences?
Yeah, so there are, I don't even know how many different types there's yoga that can be customized for so many different people depending on what their needs are, basically. But what I've learned is, I would say what is mostly considered like the fundamental basics of yoga. So it's called vinyasa yoga, which is what we in the Western community tend to refer to as like flow. So it all has to do with sun salutations and also moving your body in a very kind of rhythmic way. And then, so it's vinyasa and hatha yoga, which also for hatha yoga, it merges more active, what is more related to the sun. So more kind of strength training type of movement, to also more lunar qualities, which is more feminine, softer types of movement. So you really get the expansion of both of those things in, if you were to put it into a more, I guess, like mythical kind of connotation. With hatha vinyasa, you can really create this element of strength and mobility at the same time, and also flexibility, which kind of comes through as a result of doing, or as a result of practicing. So for example, you can have yoga for people with back problems, and a lot of the movements that you'll find within that are also based out of what you learn in hatha vinyasa, but can also be applicable, like if you're doing if you need to customize it for people who have limited mobility or who have maybe suffered a specific trauma. So it really depends what your goals are with yoga, because the world of yoga is pretty endless.
Okay, so I mean, I've dabbled, I think is probably the fairest word to say, in yoga a little bit myself, but that was always mainly because I saw it as a beneficial part of my athletic kind of training program. Never really understanding the spiritual side of it. And I think that's because I didn't really understand what spirituality was until I got a little bit older. Is spirituality something that plays a big part in your life and yoga?
So if you're not a spiritual person, that doesn't necessarily mean that you can't practice yoga. You can, but you're just not really wanting to explore that other side of it. And that's totally fine and totally okay. Again, all to do with like what best serves you. And so the spiritual element of yoga can be really interesting if that's something you're open to. And I think from my perspective, spirituality came into yoga more in the later part of my personal practice, because I link it back to my family experience with yoga and how I was introduced to the practice. So my grandfather used to practice Kriya yoga, which is rooted in a lot of breath work, spirituality, and like yoga philosophy. And he would practice Kriya yoga at 4:00 in the morning consistently every single day.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And as a teenager, I remember being like exposed to Kriya yoga and him teaching me about what it means to practice it. And it completely went over my head. Like I had no idea what he was talking about. And I was like, okay, great. You know, like if you like doing that, that's fine. And then I remember, as I got older, just feeling some of the emotional resistance of moving into different cities and finding my path with myself and in these kinds of new environments. I really felt like I had to rely on a really strong sense of self, and I felt like I really had to get connected to myself. And that would kind of be this gentle hum in the background in my mind, where I was like, anytime I practice yoga, I always leave feeling more at peace and feeling more aligned. And so more recently, I've started to put the pieces together of what that actually means for me and why it's so important for me to integrate that aspect of spirituality. And when you start to go into that, you start to discover aspects of yourself that you didn't really know existed. And so for me, personally, I mean, I'm starting to realize that I am a spiritual person and that I really do like connecting to yoga, because it makes me feel like I'm more connected with people in my life who have passed, who've used yoga as a tool, or who have had that be a really integral part of their lifestyle. It really boils down to what are you trying to connect to? Like, is it a question of just having it be an athletic practice that helps you feel just more relaxed? Or is it a question of you're really stressed and you want to make yourself feel more at peace? Or are you wanting to Are you wanting to really get connected to the deeper parts of yourself? And that element of spirituality is interesting because a lot of people think about it in a way that is very mythical, and, you know, like people start using words like auras and chakras and crystals, and it can really trigger a lot of people and turn a lot of people away because they are so not sure about what that means, and the fear of the unknown kind of consumes them, and it starts to create a lot of conflict when they start to realize that, like, when you're connecting to your spirituality, a lot of the time what is actually happening is you're connecting to your own subconscious. And when you start to dive into your subconscious, you start to realize a lot of different aspects of yourself that you didn't fully understand before. And so when we talk about spirituality, it might not feel like this for others, but this is what my takeaway is for me personally, which is I kind of am diving into my own subconscious so that I can become a self-aware person and discover what my impact is on others, and also what my own patterns of behaviors are and how I could like ameliorate those based on my habits or my emotional reactions.
But I guess for some people, whether that be physically or just as who they are as people, if yoga isn't either running it as a business or just taking part as someone who just likes to be involved, what's your advice for people that are kind of maybe feeling that they need to find their purpose and meaning?
I think what's essential for people who are looking for their own purpose is for them to realize that, I know this sounds really cliche, but it really has to do with the journey that you're on. So if you are paying attention to the things that you're doing in your everyday life, you'll be able to realize that maybe you're making certain decisions in a very unconscious way that isn't something that you actually actively want to do. It's something that you're just programmed to do. If you are the kind of person that is really struggling to find your purpose because you're feeling like your job isn't fulfilling, or you're feeling like you want to be more involved in your community, but you don't know how. And then once you start to pay attention to the fact that it's like, hold on, every morning I wake up 10 minutes before I have to leave the house. So I get to work in a bit of a like disheveled state. And then my whole day is sort of thrown off kilter, and it contributes to this perpetuated feeling of I'm not doing the right thing. What am I doing? And then you come home, crash, watch Netflix for 3 hours, fall asleep, and you repeat the same thing the following day. I mean, I've found myself in that cycle in multiple occasions. And it's when you're not living consciously and when you're not living with actual intention. And when you start to integrate what your intentions are into your life, you can really start to change your life to align yourself to find your purpose. So for example, for me, when I started practicing yoga, I realized that I really wanted to have a morning routine, and that was going to be something that for me was really, really important. And so all of a sudden I started to wake up earlier, to have more time to set my day up in a way where I would make conscious choices that would contribute to the direction that I wanted my life to go into, even if I didn't know yet what that end goal was. And slowly but surely, I would start to realize what I really wanted to do versus what I thought I really wanted to do. So I was like finding that I was spending a lot more time at my gym, spending a lot more time with the community of people that I've met there, and then starting to really want to pursue a yoga training. And then through yoga, starting to realize that I had a lot of different friendships and relationships in my life that were maybe not contributing to my own personal growth, and then finding a way to navigate that so that I could start to align myself with people and in an environment that was going to be something that, looking back on it, I could say like, this is exactly what I want, and it's giving me joy. And that's ultimately what people are looking for, is like, how do I feel good? And so through these little steps, it's like you start to change your habits, and then you start to change your behaviors, and then you start to change your patterns, and then you start to change your life. And it's a very gradual thing, but I started doing this, I want to say maybe like about a year ago. And as a result of that, I've completely changed course in my life. I was also like really downplaying a lot of sensations of grief that I was feeling, since both of my grandparents had passed while I was living in different countries. And so those events will really throw your life off kilter. And it's not something that I thought would have impacted me in the way that it did. I was living in a way that I really didn't feel grounded. I really didn't feel this feeling of home that isn't necessarily reliant on the place that you're in. It really is a feeling that you can have within yourself, because if you feel at home within yourself, you can be literally anywhere and call it home.
Right, that makes quite inspiring sense. Obviously, I think part of your answer to this would be yoga, and I guess part of my question, it can be related to yoga or not, but here on the podcast, we always get each of our one of the eight to tell us about something that has inspired them, whether it's a book, a film, an event, or a person. So what has inspired you?
I think I'm inspired a lot by people that I meet who have overcome a sense of adversity, whether that's, emotional turmoil that they were struggling with, or life events that they've overcome and have really kind of, made lemonade out of, and not because they're suppressing it and saying like, oh, everything's fine. Like they've looked into what's really affected their life and then walked through the fire to kind of make it into something exciting. I think that's what inspires me the most in my life. And also meeting people who see things in me that have allowed me to grow. People that kind of like bring out these different elements that are really something that might already be planted in our minds, but not able to recognize. Those are the kinds of people that really inspire me.
Okay, fantastic. That's I think part of that inspiration that you have comes from the fact that you're clearly someone that draws these kind of people to you. You're quite, you're very engaging and look at life in a very inspiring way. So I think that's probably also testament to who you are as a person as well.
Thank you. I mean, I'm trying just like everybody else. But I think one of my goals is to, I've been really lucky, and I feel really blessed to have had a lot of people in my life who have had such a positive influence. My family is also super inspiring. I have a little nephew who's 19 months, and seeing like a brand new person be in the world is a super inspiring thing. And it makes you want to be a better person and create a better world for them. So it's finding inspiration to me isn't necessarily reliant on any one specific thing. I think there's always inspiration anywhere. It's just a question of like how you look at it. I think the key to it all as well is like to be playful and kind with yourself in the process of it, because there's going to be times, and there still are times for me now where, my morning routine doesn't happen because I sleep through my alarm, and then life happens and it's like, oh God, like I'm late for work and what am I going to do? And that's okay. Like everybody has days like that. Everybody has moments where they struggle a little bit, but it's just a question of like, how do you bounce back from that? And do you fall into the mentality of this is all happening to me? Or are you falling into the mentality of this is happening today and that's fine and tomorrow will be different, There
are almost 8 billion people on our planet, and Erika Khanna is one of the 8.
Everyone has a story to share. Everyone has something to give. Everyone can inspire. One of the 8 is a movement of real-world people from across the globe, sharing real-life stories, inspiring others, enriching lives, and giving something back. I am, you are, everyone is one of the 8. Now streaming on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Play, or wherever you listen to your podcast. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Join the movement at oneofthea8.com.